So I wanted to share two different ideas related to the work that we do with Growing Up Boulder. And one of them is what we've learned over many years of doing our work, that really doing participatory with planning is building resilience. And so I want to share some examples of how that occurs. And then I also want to share recent work we've started in the spring of this year, working with children and youth about resilience specifically in the city of Boulder. So as background, Growing Up Boulder is this okay? It feels weird up here. Do I sound okay? Okay. All right. So Growing Up Boulder is a formalized partnership between the city of Boulder, Boulder Valley School District, and the University of Colorado. And our mission is to provide young people with opportunities for inclusion, influence, and deliberation over issues that affect their lives. And so that's a lofty goal and is very hard to accomplish. This work is rooted in, actually in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights from 1948. But in 1989, child advocates felt that because children are a protected class and have special rights, that we should have a special convention on the rights of the child. And so that was ratified in 1989 by all member nations except for the United States and Somalia. So Boulder, despite that, is plugging forward with honoring the 54 articles. It's not really funny, but it's kind of not funny because it's so ridiculous. But so there's 54 articles, and most of them are things like rights to basic service, safe and secure environments, that kind of thing. But included in this, and there's an interesting story which I can share with you later, is that included in this was that children and youth will have the right to participate in civic decision making, so that they have a voice in decisions that affect their lives formally in this convention. And that was really radical at the time and still kind of is. So child-friendly cities are based in these rights, but also in the participatory approaches that came from Kevin Lynch, and then later our own David Driscoll and Louise Chawla, who worked with Growing Up in Cities all around many countries in the world. And so child-friendly city was articulated through the rights, but has also been added to throughout the world by children and youth themselves. And so this is a group of youth in Sheffield, in England, and it's a really wonderful display of what child-friendly cities are. So what children and youth have added to this, besides the basic services, is that they really want to be integrated into society and not just into child-designated spaces. We hear this over and over again around the world. They want nature, you can see scattered throughout their vision, to be part of all cities. They want green infrastructure and sustainability. They very strongly, across the world, this is what they believe is important, as well as things like colorful places and water features that increase the quality of life. But then, in addition to this, something that we consistently hear is not only do they want opportunities to participate in decision-making about their lives, but they actually want to participate in making the world a better place. And so, in this way, child-friendly cities really can relate to resilient cities because they share this underlying goals of social justice and promotion of agency and stewardship in communities. And because children don't think of problems in a sectoral way, their problems and the way they see solutions cut across many sectors of government. And so participation is the thread that connects these two topics, and really in a very seamless way. So why does this matter in a community like Boulder? So this is every project that we work on. We ask children a few basic questions at the beginning and after the project. So one of them is, the government asked my opinions about my life or the community. And so if you can see here, this was with elementary, middle, and secondary students. And the red, that this is never true. It's very strong, pre. And also that it just doesn't apply. So they don't even recognize that they have the right to participate. They don't know that that exists. And you can see in the elementary and the secondary that after the project, we saw some movement forward. But the middle school is a little tricky. And it's a very interesting age when people start to become aware that young people are actually excluded from our society in pretty significant ways. So one of the youth who was involved in this was a semester-long project. We worked with them every week. We brought in a lot of city planners to work with them, and it was a really meaningful project in a lot of ways. One of them just said, well, they just did ask my ideas and listen to them, but I don't know if I'll ever have that opportunity again. And so we still have very much work to do to institutionalize this in ways that it's embedded into our culture and our practices, and not just in ways that a very small group of people with a very little limited budget can do in Boulder. So just to emphasize, and I see a lot of people nodding, so preaching to the converted, but feeling included matters because the public realm is where children and young people learn about society, where they explore it, absorb its values, and gain a sense of belonging. And to me, this is just fundamentally what resilience is about. And so when we don't do this, the reverse is true, right? So I'm going to go through, I decided I usually talk, when I'm asked to talk for 20 minutes, I usually talk for 40, so I'm really trying to stick to the time. But I wanted to pick a few ways that we started in 2009, so over the 7 years that we've been doing this work, what we see emerging. So kind of these ideas from projects that were focused on a really wide range of topics, from transportation planning to civic area design to neighborhood planning, what we see as themes emerging that are consistent and how those relate to resilience. So the first, and actually one of the strongest ideas, is this idea that children in Boulder in particular, but children around the world in other cities where people are doing similar work, want to see nature integrated all throughout the city. So they wanted it on the roof, they want wild zones, they want gardens and fruit trees and courtyards. They couldn't get enough of it in all kinds of ways. And so that's great in terms of green infrastructure and promoting resiliency. It's what the children want to see happen. And one example of this, we were working on a neighborhood redesign to think about how to increase density in the city of Boulder in a child-friendly way. And we happened to have the flood in 2013 in the middle of the project. And so that really influenced the way children and youth were thinking about vulnerability and design of their neighborhood. And so their immediate response was they wanted to wall off their homes. They wanted to build these big, huge, solid walls. And then we talked about what kind of experience would that be to live in, and would it even be effective? And so we brought in a lot of experts to talk about this with them. And the favorite idea that they saw were, and we looked at parks that flood and a lot of different innovative designs. And their favorite is this rendering in the middle of using hills and berms for flood mitigation, but also then, when we're not having a flood, what an awesome place to play. And so I think this is one of the things that kids bring to the thinking of how to design resilient places, because they understand the risk and the vulnerability, but they also understand what makes a good place to be. So another thing, and this was really, we partnered in the neighborhood design project, we partnered with an environmental design studio who had to be accountable to the children and youth in their design. So everything they were designing had to be responsive to what the kids were saying, which was actually a fairly big challenge for them. And so the children, when they would see the designs from the undergraduate students, they kept saying, why don't you have more sustainable and renewable materials in your design? Why aren't you using more renewable energy? And so they really pushed the students to think, which we teach, honestly, but the students really pushed them to think more broadly about how they could be integrating sustainability into their work, which was also great. And then the second area where we really see emergent resilience is through the development and promotion of social capital, both. So I've alluded to, we often, we work within classrooms and in after-school programs. We bring together at key points in time either experts in different fields and disciplines or city leaders and staff and decision makers to hear and discuss their ideas. And then there are also opportunities for children and youth to build resiliency through public meetings and presentations to city leaders. But what we hear coming from the children and youth is that they really want to see more social, cultural, and economic equity and integration in the city. And in their promotion of this, they've expanded a lot of adults' thinking in the process. They have a lot of concerns about these issues in the community of Boulder, and they are better able to see the diverse needs and promote that. And to them, it's a little easier. There are fewer barriers. So then I wanted to give, from children's own words, some of the ways that social capital is built through the process. So one is a better understanding of how to articulate and communicate values. This is from a third grader. My challenge was thinking of our design because everybody disagreed. I overcame this by civil discourse. It's probably the best quote we ever had. Something that's really important for older youth is feeling valued. And one Boulder High student said, I learned that my voice and input is important and our community cares about our youth. And then, as I've said, children and youth want to contribute to their community. And here, two students said, I like that we were able to share ideas with the city to make the civic area a better place for people. I appreciate that we got to contribute to the design of place in our community. And then as we go up the age spectrum, understanding others becomes a little more challenging. As I said, our environmental design students a little bit struggled with how to integrate children's ideas and really see how to translate that into actual designs and plans. And this student, I didn't put it on here, but he said, at first I thought, what are we going to learn from third graders making toilet paper tube models? But it was so cool seeing through their eyes what all this means. I could tell they care a lot about their community and the future of it, and they changed the way we were thinking about designing. And then this is a quote from one of the outreach coordinator at Fraser Meadows Retirement Center. We worked on a project in 2012 with Horizons K-8 School and the community at Fraser Meadows to think about how to redesign Burke Park, which was very controversial. Some of you may know some of that history. And this was unrelated, but we were interviewing her about the project, and she said, when water was pouring into Fraser Meadows, which was very significantly impacted in the flood, people from the neighborhood came out to help as a result of the better community relations they had developed during the project. The relationships we started to build, there was a whole lot more of wanting to take care of each other. We have better relationships with the community. And this was a very tense and controversial project, and it was hard to bring the people together, so this is particularly significant result. So then, as I mentioned, in the spring of this year, we started working on what are kids' actual perceptions of resilience in the community. And I didn't mention this before, but we work with schools and after-school programs, and we believe that all children don't really have opportunities to express themselves in meaningful ways in the community. So we try to reach a broad range of youth, but we do give particular attention to Boulder's least heard youth. And so through the partnerships we developed, and one strong partnership we have is with the Youth Services Initiative, which serves is an after-school and summer program for children and youth who live in Boulder's public housing. And so they're lower income and mostly Latino. It's about 99% Latino, and are some of our more vulnerable population within Boulder. So for this project, we began working with them, and we asked them basic questions. What makes you feel resilient? This was tricky to do with really young kids, because what the heck is resilience? And we had a resilience ball, and we threw it around and asked them basic questions. And then with older kids, we had them take pictures of things in their community that either fostered resilience or didn't. And so some of the things that emerged are consistent with what we know about resilience, that family, friendship, supportive networks, and activities, and not on here is pets, were some of the things that fostered resilience. And then also nature was a big piece. And so close to home nature was particularly important because they could access that on their own, but also open space and mountain parks, lands came up quite a bit. And then what doesn't make you feel resilient, and this was kind of interesting because while the things that promoted resilience were things that were very tangible and experienced by individuals, the things that came up that didn't foster resilience were often larger scale global problems such as climate change. The news was a big one. And all the things, poverty and crime and violence that are in the news doesn't make me feel very resilient either. And then fracking came up as an issue that they had a lot of concern about. Another big one was money and economic concerns. Just this week in a different project, I was working with some Casey Middle School students who also live in one of Boulder's public housing sites, and they said, "What's up with Google?" And then they were like, "What's up with all these developments? We think the city should be communicating to us more what's going on in the city." And so there's a concern that this isn't going to be a place where they can live anymore because they'll be the first to go. So, and then this I just thought was such a poignant question, which is more important, nature or money? So another thing that did not make them feel accepted was social dynamics. Bullying was a big one with the younger kids. And this was a really interesting one because the boy who was taking these pictures, he said, "I chose brotherhood because my friends and family would always have my back no matter what. Boulder has many struggles, but the community has always been there." But when other people saw the picture he took the picture of the lock to represent the bonds of brotherhood and the strength of that. But other people saw it and they said, "Oh, we feel locked out from the community and there's cultural exclusion in our community." And so it just even through the photograph alone represented some of the tensions that many of them feel. And then we started asking youth where they feel most resilient. And home and the city as a whole were areas where they felt more resilient, and school and neighborhood less resilient. And we're working with elementary and high school students right now, and we're seeing the same things from them. So some of the areas they've started to list this fall where they feel resilient are things that are, my favorite is the ice cream person, not just ice cream, but the person. But kind of consistent with what I've already shared with you. And then the elementary school drawings, where they feel resilient, you can see a really wide range of types of experiences that children have based on where they live and their experiences. Nice neighbors is actually very significant because we've heard repeatedly from all children of all ages, as I mentioned, that they don't always feel welcome in the communities. They want parks for teens to be designed because they're tired of having moms yell at them when they're there. So it kind of leads to the idea of uneven resilience, and what we're really seeing in our children and youth, especially from lower income communities, is that they really experience persistent resilience for chronic stresses, and a lot of those relate to cultural and economic issues in our community. Midway through this work, I met a couple of researchers in Mexico City, and they do similar work, but they've had trouble integrating their work into urban planning, even though they've tried. And so we said, well, we're both 100 resilient cities, so let's partner and we'll do the same process and we'll build collaboration that way. And so we're doing a parallel process with them, which is just really getting off the ground, but we have some initial work that we've done. And then we've talked about pairing with Los Angeles, also a resilient city, and urban planner James Rojas there to do a similar process. And one of the things that's interesting in this pairing is from previous work, we know that in Mexico City, children of both very low income and pretty high income and affluence feel that the street is the most hostile place. And lots of stories and drawings emerging around this, with this being a dog that was run over. But then we see, which isn't necessarily that surprising to think about for Mexico City, but it shows sort of, when I've told this, people are very shocked, but then they say, oh, well, it's Mexico City. But then this week I just had similar drawings from our elementary school students in Boulder. So also this week, we were planning a neighborhood walk, and one of our no girls came. And so we found out that in this neighborhood, the mothers would not let the girls participate, even though it's this program they normally come to, because they didn't want them walking outside in their neighborhood. So we have a lot more work to explore why that is and kind of really unplug what's happening. But we know that there are neighborhoods in this community that really are significantly in need of work. So fortunately, children and youth often have defined resilience as taking care of others in our community. So there's a really good opportunity here that's somewhat untapped. But we have the mechanisms in place to address some of the disparities and vulnerabilities that we see, and hopefully also by partnering with other similar communities in other cities, we can kind of grow the network of resilient youth. So thank you.